Mira, it's very nice to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I remember the last time we talked, which was the first time we talked. Yeah. I thought like we should have recorded it.
I walked away from that just amazed and so inspired to be more connected to everybody who's working in this space. Because I love to talk about conversational AI and automation and all this, and to connect with somebody who thinks like just so out of the box and so interestingly, and you had the whole psychology bent to what you were talking about. It was fascinating. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to connect to anyone who hears something they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, or I want to talk about that some more. I'm open to talk anytime.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we need you here. This energy is amazing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about GoDaddy and what type of bots that you guys have built internally. And I really like how you think about bots differently than most organizations. So you can talk a little bit about that too.
Cool. Well, so I'm Mira, Lynn. I am the manager of conversational AI at GoDaddy. And we have been on our bot journey for 3 years. So, woo, right, yeah.
Happy birthday.
But yeah, it's wild. And we have our bots deployed in the self-help space. We want to provide sources for people to be able to get the answers that they need on their own. If they don't want to talk to a person, but we also have built into our whole architecture escalation. If you ever need to talk to a person, if you want to call, you want to chat, it's all within the same window. And so we've gone through several different pivots of our bot that are interesting and that I would love to share if anybody is interested in our journey. And to give you a little bit more background about me, I'm a writer. I'm a technical writer. And so when I came to this chatbot space, I was coming from a writing perspective. I wasn't coming from like an engineering perspective. And so when we first sort of tiptoed into the world of chatbots, one of the really, really important things to our team was to maintain autonomy over the writing and over the language and how the chatbot delivers the words. Instead of having to write the words in a Word document or somewhere static and hand them over to somebody else who would bring them to life, so to speak. And so we've developed some very cool tools. We use Dialogflow as our platform. And we've developed some really cool interactions in tandem with our engineering team in order to do that, in order to maintain our writers' autonomy. And can I share some slides?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Sorry, this is kind of informal. I don't know. Should we just chat or should I share? Okay, hang on.
It's like a very open format.
Tell us your secrets.
Yeah, show us your secrets.
I will show them. Let me, hang on. Whoa, hang on. Slides, file, screen. I'm just going to share my screen.
Sharing your screen.
Oh, can't do that. Hang on.
Yeah. Dustin, you somehow still have two things. At least on mine.
Yeah. Woo! All right.
You got it.
Okay.
I got 3 on mine.
Let's go here.
Okay.
Can you guys see this? My yellow page?
Yep.
I like that.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yes.
So this is like the whole presentation, and I figured this was like a little bit more informal, and I wanted to just kind of bounce around and show some things. But I'll send a video of like this whole talk formally, so that if anybody wants to watch it as like the story, then they can. But I wanted to show you It's our journey. Okay, so this is we started with stuff like this, which is, if you're an engineer, you're looking at it, you're great. It's an if-then statement and in JavaScript. But I want to remind you that we are writers. My team is writers, like language writers, English writers, not code writers. And so when we were working in Dialogflow, we were so committed to this idea of maintaining the autonomy of the writers in delivering the experience and delivering the customer experience, that we went down this path. And I made my team learn JavaScript to write things like this. And in totally unrelated news, I was soon dealing with a mutiny on my team. I'm just kidding. It's totally related. This was just obviously not a sustainable choice that we ended up with. And so we kind of backed up and we were like, all right, what are we going to do? Because we still didn't want to just break down and start, hire a production engineer to manage the chatbot code, and we weren't ready to go down that path. And so, it's not in here. So what we developed at a certain point with our engineers are modular payloads that we put into Dialogflow that the writers can fill in different parameters, and it allows us to still have complete control over things like switching from one agent to another agent, or all the querying a different agent. Like we can take the utterance that somebody puts in, and while we're in agent 1, we can query agent 2 and say, do you have an answer to this? And if so, we can dynamically show different options to the end user. But all that's controllable by the writers on my team, and we don't need production engineering support to do that. So that was one kind of interesting thing that I love sharing with people, because I hear sometimes about teams that feel a little bit disempowered from the writing side of the chatbot, and that they're just writing the words. And I just want to encourage everyone that it's possible. Hang on, I'm going to get, oh gosh, where are we now? Where did I put you guys? Oh, there you are. Hi. Maybe I should stop that. Pause screen. Oh, there we go. All right. So there was one element that I wanted to share. It's just about how we've approached that problem. And the other element of our chatbot journey that is still being written today is all about the words, right? I'm a writer, so I'm always going to be talking about how the chatbot interacts with people and how the chatbot asks questions and what kind of language the chatbot uses. And so one of the other evolutions that we've gone on in our journey is we came from what we call traditional help now, but that's articles, like a search and article interaction. Search for a term, you get a series of articles that match that. And so our first iterations of our chatbot were that. They were articles that were broken up into chat bubbles. And they were so bad. It was so terrible from a customer experience perspective, from a cognitive load perspective. It was so bad. And you can still see it today. If you go to mirabot.xyz, you can see our old chatbot. Yeah, our very, 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 very first one.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you learned that were totally counterintuitive?
That's a good question.
Yeah, where you were like, oh wow, I can't believe this is true.
So that's sort of where I was going on this second evolution path. It's we started with articles, and it was terrible, and then we got better at the idea of conversation and designing a conversation, but we were still answering from like a search and search results kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
What we've come and sort of realized along this way is that the metaphor for the chatbot is not actually the search and browse article help experience at all. It's the customer service agent experience, and that the agent is really the metaphor for the chatbot and how you design a conversation. It's like, how would a human respond to this utterance, to what they said? And like I say that is like, oh, well, duh, that's obvious. That should be like a person. But none of us know how to design conversations. Like, even though we're sitting here now going, oh yeah, we should have the chatbot behave more like a human.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Because it's not a human. You still have to write what it's going to say. So you still have to have some way of writing the words so that it sound like, so not so that it sounds like a human. Like, we never want to masquerade as a human,
right.
But how do we design our language model, and how do we use entities to really react to an utterance in the same way that a human would, in asking clarifying questions and in setting up like disambiguations when it's too vague, or open-ended, kind of like a clever ploy to get you to re-utter, right? There's an open-ended question. Well, tell me more about that. And so these are the things that we're right now, like today, are starting to struggle through. That don't like that on the surface seem obvious. So I kind of like unanswered your question because you said counterintuitive, but it's like this, like once we arrived at this, we were like, oh, of course it should react like a human. But then how you do that is it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. And so like manipulating the pieces of the tools that we have available to us is the challenge.
Also, some humans react better than others, right?
Totally.
So
right. There's a whole range of quality.
Right. This person, it was kind of messed up how they answered, but this person, that was good. So.
Definitely.
So it sounds like maybe a good analogy would be grammar. Like, if you're a native English speaker, you might not know, all the different grammatical rules. And if a foreigner came in and said, hey, tell me, the grammatical rules of English, unless you study them, you would have no idea. And maybe the example in the bot is, it's easy to think about questions and answers or intense, questions and answers. But when we talk to each other, we have a lot of these like small little follow-up phrases like, what did you mean by that? Or, okay, tell me more. Like, is that kind of the direction?
Exactly. That's exactly the direction. To date, we've thought about our chatbot content as content, and so when you think about creating content, you have a model, you have guidelines, you have different content types. And so I think we were too stuck in that mode, in that sort of framework. It was too rigid. And we were like, well, this is this type of answer, because content is the answer. It's the thing that you're getting to. But what we're now realizing is really that the bot is the means to get to the answer. It's not necessarily the answer. And the superpower, if you will, of conversational AI is the journey. It's the disambiguation part. It's the being able to ask a follow-up question on something. And so our content types now are actually question types. And that's how we're modeling it instead of answers. We're thinking less and less about the actual answer and more about how we get you to that end point. So we have disambiguations, which are, which we consider sort of like closed like I just said, we have open-ended disambiguation, which is really just an open-ended question to get you to say more. Say more about that. Like you just said, change name servers. Tell me more about how you want to change your name servers. But now we have this idea of disambiguation, which is, okay, we know what you're trying to do. It's one of these three things. Yeah. Or you said, you need help with your website, and we have two different website builders. So we need to know which direction to send you, right? So it's like a close-ended disambiguation. And then we have troubleshooting, which is really just a series of disambiguations on, we know, my website is down. Okay. Yeah. So let's go through this first series of questions and you answer, and then let's go through this next series of questions and then you answer, and then we can get you to a much more likely end place for you to get your answer. Like instead of just saying my website is down, and then we're like, ooh, that's too complicated, we're just going to escalate you to a human, which is what we are doing today. And like in production. But what we're working on now is this idea of like, actually, let's troubleshoot that, because we know how to ask questions and we know the different elements that could be at play here when you say your website is down. And so we can ask you these series of questions, have an interaction with you. And then it's like, okay, there is definitely an end that is, okay, you have to talk to a human. I'm sorry. We can't help you. But we've gone through a series of questions that the human would have asked you anyway when you got there. Right. So now when we pass you off, the human can look and see, oh, okay, well, they said this for that question. I don't have to ask that. They said this for that question. I don't have to ask that. So even though we may still end up just passing you to a human, we've at least helped that experience be better as well once you get there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know our engineering team gets pretty angry when we escalate a tech support to the engineering team where they got to pause what they're doing and then ask like questions like, okay, which device were you on? What browser were you using? Like things that we probably should have asked, but we were just like, it seems like way over my head. Why don't you take this?
Scary.
Yeah, then they have to do it, and it's like, it'd be probably better if they stayed on task and continued working on product instead of pausing to do. People have questions and bugs should be addressed, but if we can clarify a few things beforehand and then hand off that baton to the human at the right point, that is so helpful.
The other thing that reminds me of is another shift that we've gone through recently is we've always had questions in the bot and disambiguations, but they've been kind of like, do you want this happy path or do you want this happy path? This is what we have instructions for. It's like we stayed away from the scary stuff that was hard. And it's like, that's where we can actually do a lot of good. I mean, we can help with happy path. Like happy path helps the X% of people, right? Great. Okay, that's wonderful. But I think there's more impact to be made if you start to try and dissect what the unhappy paths are. And how can
crappy path? Happy path, happy and crappy.
I like the rhyme. That's good.
I've been on camera for 6 hours. That's pretty good.
So Mira, it sounds like, in terms of like mental model, like a lot of people just think about a bot as like a number of flows, but you're thinking about it as basically a conversation in which you're collecting information. And then once you have enough information, then you're outputting the most probable or the best answer you can based on what you collected.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we're going. We're not doing that today.
As you're collecting this and you're asking these questions or these follow-ups, so tell me more about that. What happened, like to what extent or in what way do you include when people just veer off and then they just ask a completely off-target question? That the context is very loosely related.
So it's a whole other category that we've started tagging.
Okay.
Is unhandled response. We don't have a good word for it yet because that kind of meshes with like unhandled, and that's not what we're talking about. But it's like, it's when somebody says something within the context of our content of a conversation that we didn't anticipate. And so they hit the fallback, or they like mismap weirdly in a flow. But it's something that we're actually looking at per intent to try and understand what we're missing within that umbrella. And it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's what's really cool about looking at it though is that like I can't remember what the other situation was, but it was like, well, we had a conversation about this early on that was like, well, you know what, we're just going to ignore that because it's not something that was intended anyway, and we didn't write for it. But because it's a bot and it's not a human, it is a 1-for-1 interaction with it. So the human says something, the customer, the person using the bot says something. The bot has a response for that. It may be your fallback. It may be not what you intended, mismapped to a different intent, but it's a 1-for-1. And so what we've realized is that we actually do have to have a plan for everything that they say, even if we're like, yeah, that's off the rails. That was so crazy. So we've actually developed an idea of like in intent fallback that has like a contextual response to the user because it's fallen back. So we don't have a plan for it in that intent, but we want to respond differently than just, I don't know, can you try again? Like whatever your standard fallback is, right? Like ours is, how do you want to get help? And we give you escalation options. You can chat, you can call. And so like, that's our standard fallback. And we don't want to just respond that way when somebody's in the middle of a flow. So that's how we're sort of trying to address that idea is contextual fallback.
Got it. So I have one more question, and then I want to start opening it up to the attendees, and they already have a bunch of questions for you. So,
cool.
I remember when you and I talked, you said that since you're having UX and conversational designers like lead, and since they're not held back by engineering and AI, they can go in and create flows and so on. That's meant for like new types of insights for you guys that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So can you talk a little bit more about like how structuring your team in such a way where your design or conversational design first is leading to insights that you wouldn't have if you were like engineering first, or vice versa?
One of the simplest outcomes that I think was only possible because we have writers at the helm is we originally had a persona for our bot. We had the bot spoke from the first person as an entity. We like spent a lot of time and energy because this was like ingrained in our team. It's like, this is necessary. It has to be a character and have an avatar and have a name. And we even did usability testing around that stage where we heard people say, I don't really care about the name. I don't really care as long as it answers. Because we're in self-help. So something's broken already. This isn't like a weather chatbot that's like, I'm just curious about this and maybe I want to chat. This is like, my website is down. My business is suffering. Like something is broken and I'm coming here to fix it. Or I couldn't figure it out on my own and so I'm here. So I'm already a little bit ticked off. Right. So that's the emotional state that we're in. And so we still wouldn't drop that the bot needed to have a persona and we needed to be a character until pretty recently, I'd say maybe this summer.
Yeah.
is when it finally clicked for us that, oh, I'm sorry, I remember what it was. We had so much volume of folks thinking that they were talking to a human. Even though in our welcome message and like all over the place, we're like, this bot can do this or, you know, I am a bot. Sorry, we were still speaking from I. And so someone on my team had the idea to just change the pronouns. Like, let's just not speak from the first person, and let's speak from the plural. If we have to speak from the first person, we're plural. So we are GoDaddy. We are speaking to you as GoDaddy. We are not an entity that is separate from GoDaddy. And to change the focus of the pronouns. So just rework the words so that you can favor the second person pronoun. You can do that over here. We can show you how. And so to rewrite the language so that we were focusing more on that second person. And it had two results. One, which we were going for, which was we saw a drastic reduction in the number of people that thought they were talking to a human, because we don't speak like a human anymore. We don't say, I can help you with that. We say, how can we help? And it's very minor, but huge reduction in that kind of traffic. And the tone of everything we write is much more empowering, because we're saying you can do that and we can help you how to do, it's all focused on the user and how the user can be successful. And it's minor, and it's not something that you might notice if you go and talk to our bot, but it had this very drastic impact on our users.
You know, there's such a huge difference if I tell you something and it's a one-to-one and you think I'm a person, like personhood comes into play.
Yeah.
Right? But if it's we and it's anonymous, then there is no personhood.
Right. We have less anger in our bot too, since we made that shift from I to we.
It's funny seeing angry transcripts.
Oh God. Don't read transcripts on a Friday. Just don't. We don't do it. We don't read them on Fridays. People get real angry. But we have definitely, I mean, that was just, I don't think we would have gotten to that point if we didn't have writers doing the data analysis and like empowered to own the experience of the chatbot. Like, I know that is still language, and like possibly we would have, but I really think that came from like an ownership of the experience. Like, my writers feel like they are in charge of delivering the experience to users. And I don't know that they would feel that way if we just wrote the words and handed them off to somebody else.
Got it. Dustin, did you have a question? And then I'll get to a few more.
I took a few notes. This is great. I like the idea of kind of empowering the users and adding we. Like it's what you learn to do, like how to write emails as a business as well. I don't
Right.
understand why a bot should learn differently. That's great. And one thing is, it's at least this is my opinion. GoDaddy has always had like amazing customer support. Like for over the last 5 years, one of the only companies that you call and you really don't have to sit on hold. You actually get a human relatively quickly. And you guys have done a phenomenal job at that, and even passed over to someone for technical needs and be able to kind of mitigate that. Now that you guys are adding kind of bots and things like that in that mix as well, that's just kudos to you guys. It's incredible. But from a business standpoint, like what kind of effects, like do other, I'm sure other customers kind of have the same standpoint as I do. I mean, we use bot copy. We use GoDaddy. I'm very happy with it.
Cool. Awesome.
Our co-founder actually was a original founder in Mad Mimi, your email client now.
I'm from Mad Mimi.
Oh, do you know Rob LeBeau?
No.
Rob? Oh, awkward Rob, if you're watching, not as popular as you thought.
Do I know you, Rob? I don't know. Oh my God. I mean,
Yeah,
I was a peon at Mad Mimi. I wasn't like important, but Yeah, that's
he's
how
one
I
of
got to GoDaddy. Is I was writing blog and help for Mad Mimi, and then we got acquired.
Yeah, he was the original co-founder there, and
I probably do.
Head of the
It's just
creative
been too
department.
long.
Yeah, I won't tell. But yeah, anyway, we I admire that in any company. T-Mobile was on earlier as well. They've been ahead of the IVR system for a long time now, where you call and it's actually a really good IVR, like robotic, like gets you to the right person. Incredible. A lot of companies have this huge focus on, first touch point, like getting the sale, and divert their entire team, like have a big sales team to just close the deal. And then don't look at that kind of like hold the deal, hold the client. It's easier to I talked about this earlier. It's easier to sell an existing client and keep an existing than it is to obtain new ones. I think you guys do a really good job at that. Implementing these bots and kind of being in that position and seeing it every day. What have you seen? What tasks is it automating? What's customers' feedback to it? What's employment feedback to it? Yeah, I guess
our charter is guidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like providing guidance. I mean, like overall, not just the bot, but our entire digital care team is.
You're a hero's guide.
Yeah,
the customers are the heroes, and you guys are the guide. I like it.
But we also have our human guides that are like our counterpart. We're digital care. We provide digital guidance. Our human guides provide human guidance. But weaving the two together is really important. And it's another thing that we're tackling with the bot too, is routing to the right person. Based on what you say. You give us an inkling of what you need and in the bot. And so we should be smart enough to be able to pass you to the right department when you do want to talk to a human. So we actually have 4 different agents that are in production working simultaneously to do that. Like one is just routing. That's just listening to what you say to try and understand where to send you when you want to escalate.
Got it.
And then our others are content.
So Mira, we have a question from Emma. And she asked, do you have human eyes on it to catch missteps in conversation? And how do you identify when that has happened?
Not live. We don't have people sitting and watching live bot conversations. But we do like analytics research on different, and that's that report that shows us by intent when they say something that we didn't plan for, that shows us those missteps,
right.
in that context. But we also like comb our fallback a lot, just to see, if it's something like they say, wait, what do you mean? That we need to have a report that shows us the intent that came from, because just that by itself, if it's, it's going to hit a fallback, we don't know where they came from or anything like that. So like looking at our fallback gives us a good kind of broad brush view of like, oh, this is mismapping, or people are really not understanding this. But to be able to see those things in context with the intent is really important to being able to improve that conversation. But we don't have people who are looking live at conversations. It's all after the fact that we try to tweak and improve.
Got it.
Because our fallback is escalation. So that's kind of why we think that's okay. Because like if things go way off the rails, you can just talk to a person. Like anytime you want, and you can ask for that anytime you want, and you'll get it. And so that's since our fallback is people.
So
I like that.
I really like that. I think in one way it's easy to kind of see where the bot's failing, either in a flow or an intent. But how do you catch something that's more broad, like using I versus we? Because that's like, you're not going to get that from a flow necessarily.
Right.
That's like more of like a structural issue.
So we use Dashbot for our analytics. And they have a tool called phrase clusters.
Okay.
And so they apply their own proprietary NLU to all the utterance coming into the bot. And then they do like an unsupervised grouping on everything that's coming into the bot. And they say, we think these things are similar. We think these things are similar. I think these things are similar. And so and it tells you which intent it mapped to in real life, in your bot. And so I think like one point of that is improving your accuracy and understanding, getting another view on how things group and map. But what we use it a lot for looking at customer behavior and customer language, because it does a really good job of grouping like phrased statements. Okay. And there's really no other way, like unless you're going to do some like n-gram analysis, which is a little basic. Like I like that it's a natural language, so it's like a step up from that. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about effectively long tail queries. We're not talking about like forward domain, change name servers so much. These are people who are saying whole sentences about things. And so to be able to look at them in a group together, it gives us a good view into how people phrase things or how people are phrasing things. And so we can see things like upset people, like because they tend to group together. And that's a good way. That's also a good way for us to look sort of broad brush at what's coming into the bot, because it allows us also to dismiss groups. Say, okay, we don't need to look at that. That's just people saying, what's the phone number? Like, okay. And so like it gives us kind of like allowance to ignore certain things, and we can look more closely at a bigger group of just utterances that people are saying to the bot. So, yeah. But we do a lot of manual data slogging for not a pretty word, but we do. I mean, my team stares at data all the time. It's just what's coming into the bot. They look at transcripts. They look at they look at flows. They look at like journey flows throughout the whole session experience, like where they bounce around between different bots. Maybe they'll escalate. Maybe they'll come back to the bot. So it's a lot of manual effort. There isn't like a
easy way.
Right.
I used to have, so you can manual effort. I used to get all the how on my Apple Watch, I put so we set our chat bot copies agents on our website goes through Slack if we want to take over live.
Oh, nice.
But we can also look at all the transcripts via Slack. And only for a week could I tolerate it, but I set the notifications on to get every single notification, and my wrist was like buzzing for a week. I was like, just kind of watching people like, where are you going to go? It can get really, there's a lot of information there. Yeah, it can be overwhelming, but also kind of fun to look at sometimes.
Yeah, it's essential, I think, because we don't have a bot for our bot. Like, we don't have a bot that's smarter than our bot that can make our bot. So it's
botception? Are we talking botception here?
Yes.
Finally, Jesus. I was wondering when we were going to start talking about that.
About 5:00.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm in Austin.
Yeah, Brenda has a question for you, Mira. She wants to know what's the best way to put the conversational designers in charge when they get pushback from marketing or some other department, and what ammo do you have to push back that, hey, really should be the conversational designers that are leading this. They should be primary, not marketing or sales or engineering.
Oh. Right. Now, one thing you have to think about in that conversation is what's the point of your bot? Because if your bot is making sales, then maybe you should have some salesy people involved in the writing of stuff, right? Because if that's the point and that's how you want to interact with people, then maybe. But we have we have a really nice sort of distributed brand writing kind of model at GoDaddy. We have our brand team, and they define the brand voice and tone at a high level. And then, the copywriters and the front of site writers and the help writers can all take that and adjust it as it needs to be for each of those contexts. But I think the biggest point is, are you making a help chatbot? Because a help chatbot should never speak with marketing language. It should never speak with sales language, because that's not what these people are trying to do. It's not where in it, and you're not going to get them. Just because they're coming to your site doesn't mean that they're like open for buying something or upgrading or anything like that. Like they're coming to help because something's broken. Something's not working. So you have to have empathy. You have to have, we call it sage guidance. Like you have to have a helpful tone.
I really like that, sage guidance.
Sage guidance. We provide sage guidance. And you have to be helpful if you want to provide help. And so I think that's the biggest argument, is that nobody who's coming for help is going to be receptive to marketing and sales interactions. And it's not the right time. You're going to offend them. You're going to push them away. They're going to get grossed out and mad.
Yeah. And when you first started building your bot, like, where did you get the data to know what to train and where to start? Were you looking at chat logs, customer service emails? What people are clicking most on your website? Like, what did you decide? How did you decide where to go first? And what data did you use
we used, let me see if this is still here. We used pretty much everything we could get our hands on.
Okay.
I have a slide about it. Here we go. Can I get back to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chico. Says it's sharing. Hang on. What? You are not sharing. Sharing on? Am I sharing?
One screen that's loading. Am I the only one seeing that, or are you seeing that too, Dustin?
I see Dustin with a loading screen.
Yeah, me too. Dustin, can you find out why you have two? Because when I go into the individual permissions, I just see one of you here.
Let me refresh.
Okay.
Here. Can you see that? My PowerPoint?
I still see you.
Still see me.
But now, here we go. It's coming up.
Can you see it now?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, cool. So, we did. We combed every source we could to pull that data to build our first initial training data sets. A big one was help search. And then we also pulled from live chat transcripts, which was better because it was conversational. People are speaking like they would speak to the bot. Search is not great. It gives you kind of an idea, but it's not usually how people form that in a conversation. We went to our community forums. We looked at our article comments, and we also, I didn't include it on here, but we got input from all our human guides too. Like, how do people ask about this? How do people say this topic instead of this one? Because we have a lot of similarly related topics at GoDaddy. And so we got a lot of agent input too, to structure these initial training data sets. But as I guess everyone, as you should know, your initial training is a guess.
Yes.
And once you put it into production is when you actually start to understand how people are going to talk or, chat.
So wanted to let the attendees know we have just a couple of questions left. And then if you have any questions left for Mira, just ask them in the chat. We'll shoot them over. And Mira, this really brings the question of failure, because a lot of times companies, they put up a website, they test everything, do user testing, and things don't fail. But with bots, you take all that data, you create a bunch of conversations, and then it fails all the time, right? And then your boss is like, why are we doing this? It's failing, and our customers are mad. How do you address that challenge, and how do you show the value in spite of that, and I don't know, persuade or inspire your leadership to invest even more and say, hey, look, this isn't failure, this is success, or whatever.
Yeah, we frame most things in experimentation at GoDaddy, and so failures are okay as long as you're learning. And so if we can always, one thing we are continually doing is telling the story about what we are learning and what we're doing and how it's shifting our perspective or how we're able to get better because of this failure. Mm-hmm. And so it is a lot about, I guess it's spin. Like we don't say, oh, that didn't work, bummer. It's more like, check it out. The thing we thought was going to happen didn't happen, but all this stuff that we learned means that now we know more and we can set up an even better experiment following, that is more likely to succeed or more likely to make the impact that you want to make. And so it's really all about learning. And as long as you're learning, you can't fail.
Ooh. Wow. Is that the quote we should...
That's it.
Laura asked the question.
I'm going to make you a t-shirt.
I have to thank the great Robert Ashby for that one. That is not mine. But
yeah. So are there any tools that you use to test chatbot? And when it comes to tools and technology that you guys use, how do you make decisions on we're going to do this internally or we're going to use this external tool? Like, how do you make that decision, and what tools are you guys using?
Yeah. So, wait, is it tools specifically to test, or just tools in general?
You can start there, then you can open it up.
Okay, tools to test.
Yeah.
So, testing is a sore spot for us. We do, like I was talking about, how we do manual work on our analytics, our data analytics. Also, our testing is a lot of manual effort. It's kind of like just grunt work. We bash a lot, and we have test cases, and not in the sense of like unit tests that are run automatically. I wish, maybe someday. But we have like test case write-ups that are about what do you want? What's the situation that you're trying to test? What should the outcome be? And having a document of that so that we can have lots of people run through these scenarios in their own way and see if anything's breaking. And we try to do that before every major release. We don't do it. We just do like internal team bashing if we're just updating training or we're just trying to tweak the accuracy a little bit here and there. But like if we're releasing a whole new set of content in the bot, we'll try to do that with a larger team. And I have had conversations with our engineers about automating testing, which would be amazing. And I have seen teams that do it, that they just have internal, real simple tools that they've built that have, you can import a CSV of your intended intent and some utterances, and you can have it run through your version automatically, and it just gives you an accuracy score so that you can see if it's getting better or getting worse. And so in terms of determining for tools, if we buy it or we build it, sometimes it depends on the dollar amount. Like sometimes we can just get a pass. If it's a small enough dollar amount, it's like, okay, yeah, this is just seems like it's easier to buy than to build. But if I don't know, and two, I would not be able to tell you that. But in terms of like larger decisions, like for Dashbot, for example, when we were deciding if we could buy that or we should build it, it comes down to pretty thorough like cross-team analysis. Like our engineers do a whole analysis on the tool and then an analysis on how long it would take them to build that. And so we just do that kind of cost analysis on it. And then sometimes we have to like, road show the value of what we would get out of it and say, well, this is really important because it'll allow us to do X, Y, Z. And so you should give us money for it.
Maybe someday you'll create an internal bot that will test all your other bots.
Yes. A bot for our bots.
Yeah.
Bot session again.
Yes. Bot session.
Well, I have one last question before I get to that. Dustin, do you have any last questions?
No, and we covered a whole gambit there. It was really fun talking to you. Look forward to. I'd love to connect after this as well. So
yes.
Cool.
So last question, and then before everyone goes, we have one last announcement. Me and Dustin. So Mira, last question. Is there any piece of tech that you wish existed? It could be a tech or a service that you wish existed that doesn't. And imagine you have a magic wand and it'll exist. What would it be?
So, like, if it exists, but I just don't have it, that doesn't count.
No, like, imagine, like,
tell us what you want.
Wish list? Should I just give you my wish list?
Yeah, imagine, like, I wish that, there was an XYZ service that I can just offload this part to it. Or I wish that there was this tech that would, do X, Y, and Z for me automatically. Like, is there some part of what you guys are doing that you're like really frustrated about that you wish existed?
Yeah, I think it's all around. This is the real magic wand. Is like I wish that I had something that could just tell me the content gaps that exist. Right? Like we've written all this content, and then just innate to bot data analysis is that it's all centered around what you've written, like the known.
Right.
We wrote all this stuff and we have these intents. And so all of my data is going to be about those. And like, I have this just big bucket of data that's everything else. And so the phrase clustering Dashbot is really great. But I wish if I was like, waving my magic wand, I wish that I could just get a list that's like, most people are asking about this that you don't have an answer for. And then, like had some kind of like prioritization of the volume that was being asked of the stuff that we don't cover. Because that's the hardest thing to understand is what you don't cover already. And that's also, and if somebody has that, let me know. But that's also would be helpful to the business too, because that can change. Like what you've written is static. Not that it's static, but that doesn't shift. It's not dynamic.
Right.
What people are asking about that you don't have content for, that you haven't anticipated, that is shifting. That could shift. They could be start asking about something that you haven't even thought about, and it just takes you by surprise. And like, if you don't have any way to really look at that incoming big, huge bucket of stuff that's not covered.
In like questions that your bot's not answering well, those drop-offs, those aren't good enough because of the threshold, or where is the current way failing in addressing that problem? Because I'm sure in Dashbot you could see, intents that, or questions or conversations that haven't been answered that went to a default response, for example.
Yeah. So it's that this may be also a GoDaddy problem, because our content set is very, very broad and like highly nuanced within there. Like we have many things that are really related to each other, but we also cover a huge footprint of stuff. And so it still leaves, even though it groups, it is useful in a like top level way. But within those groups, you still need a human brain to look and say, this is actually different than this. They're asking about two different things. Like an easy example, but this isn't a very good one, is like transfer in or transfer out. The way that people say those things are often really similar when they actually mean the opposite things. Like, I want to transfer my domain from Wix to GoDaddy. I want to transfer from GoDaddy to Wix. It's like the way that people use prepositions and the subject, and they can switch them around. So they get mixed up. A machine mixes those up all the time. And even like, I mean, that's our one of our huge accuracy issues is transfer, because there's the different directions and it's confusing the way people say it. And so it could be that it's just like for other companies who have different content sets, like maybe phrase clustering is the magic one, and that would totally like solve that problem for them. And that's cool. But for us, there still is a lot of filtering that we have to do, like within the clusters themselves.
Right.
To really try and understand the volume of the individual intents.
Right. And at the end of the day, language is just symbolic.
It's all metaphor.
Yeah, it's all, the word rock's not really a rock.
Right.
So it's all just pointing to something else.
Yep.
So there's always going to be these sort of things in language that only make sense in language, but don't actually make sense in the real world, and vice versa. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Email or LinkedIn. But I don't love LinkedIn, so it may take me a while to respond on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm right there with you.
Oh, I just don't. Oh my gosh.
Every message is like just so spammy.
There's too many layers to messages too. Like you have like contact requests, but then they can also send a message, but that message isn't in your inbox. So it like lives in this weird.
I think I currently know like 3,000 developers now that if anybody needs services, they let me know like twice a week.
That's a good pool.
Yeah.
That's a good pool. Okay, Mira, wonderful having you. Feel free to share your LinkedIn or your email in the chat. And if anyone has questions, feel free to email her or ask her directly. And then,
please.
Yes.